My sister threw a tantrum over a designer bag, so I bought it first. Now my family thinks I'm the villain, and then, growing up, birthdays were a big deal in our family. Not just the cake and candles kind of deal, but an all-out, over-the-top, borderline competitive event. Thoughtful gifts, extravagant surprises, and an unspoken contest over who could outdo the last year's presents. My parents set the tone early on: elaborate parties, expensive gifts, grand gestures. It became the norm. I embraced it. My younger sister, Melanie? Not so much. Melanie was always the quirky one, the free spirit, the one who did things her own way. At least, that's how my parents described her. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one, the planner, the one who never forgot a birthday or a special occasion. The contrast between us bled into everything: our personalities, our achievements, and especially our gifts to each other. For years, I went all out for Melanie's birthdays. One year, I spent months saving up for a custom gold necklace with her birthstone. It cost me around $250, but I didn't care. She loved it. Or at least, she acted like she did. Another year, I tracked down a limited edition art print from her favorite illustrator, something she had been obsessing over online. That one set me back $300. Again, totally worth it. But when my birthdays rolled around, it was like Melanie stopped at a gas station on the way to the party and grabbed whatever was within arm's reach. One year, she handed me a coffee mug with "I'd agree with you, but then we'd both be wrong" written on it. Another time, a pack of mismatched socks, the kind you find in a clearance bin. Last year, a half-melted scented candle that she claimed was vintage. Every time, I smiled, said thanks, and tucked it away somewhere out of sight. It wasn't about the money. It was the effort, or rather, the complete lack of it. My parents brushed it off every single time. "Oh, honey, that's just Melanie's humor. She's creative. She doesn't think about gifts the way you do. That's her way of showing love." I heard those excuses so many times, I could recite them in my sleep. The truth? Melanie wasn't quirky. She just didn't care enough to try. And maybe that would have been fine if she wasn't so damn particular about what she wanted for herself. She had this designer handbag she had been obsessing over for years. Some high-end luxury brand, the kind that costs more than most people's rent. It was $2,200, and she treated it like it was her life's goal. She talked about it constantly. She had pictures of it saved to her Pinterest boards, reposted photos of influencers carrying it, and even made jokes about manifesting it. Melanie swore she was saving up for it, but then she'd blow her money on other things: concert tickets, designer sneakers, the latest gadgets. It became a running joke in our family. "Oh, that's the bag she'll never buy." I didn't think much of it until my last birthday. That night, Melanie strolled into my party late, as always, tossed a tiny gift bag into my lap, and grinned. "Here, this reminded me of you," she said. Inside was a second-hand keychain. The latch was broken. She thought it was hilarious. I just nodded, thanked her, and set it aside. But something inside me snapped. Years of being brushed off, years of watching her demand the best from everyone else while giving me the bare minimum. It all crashed over me like a wave. I didn't say anything that night. But the next day, something changed. I walked into a luxury boutique while shopping downtown. Just for fun, I told myself. Just to look. And there it was. The exact bag Melanie had been talking about for years, sitting right in front of me. I wasn't planning on buying it. But the longer I stood there, the more I realized something. For years, I had put everyone else first. Thoughtful gifts, careful planning, always making sure Melanie felt special. And what did I get in return? Broken keychains and cheap mugs. I had worked hard. I had saved. I had earned my money. So, in that moment, I decided to finally do something for myself. I bought the bag. The moment I walked out of that store with the bag in my hand, I felt something I hadn't expected: triumph. Not guilt, not hesitation, just a deep sense of satisfaction. For once, I had done something for myself without thinking about how it would affect someone else. It wasn't about Melanie. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about rewarding myself for all the long hours, the late nights, the hard work. At least, that's what I told myself. I didn't hide the bag. I used it the very next day when I went out with Marcus. He noticed it immediately. Nice bag, he said, raising an eyebrow. Didn't Melanie want one just like that? I shrugged, adjusting the strap on my shoulder. Yeah, she did. Marcus stared at me for a moment, then smirked. Damn, you really bought it? I did. I said simply. She's going to lose her mind. I rolled my eyes. It's just a bag. Sure, Marcus said. And a hurricane is just a little wind. I laughed it off, but I knew he was right. I knew, the second she saw it, that Melanie would react as if I had personally stolen the thing from her hands. Still, I wasn't going to hide it. I had nothing to feel guilty about. So, a few days later, I did what I always did. I posted a casual picture on Instagram. Nothing dramatic, just a quick shot of my coffee, my hand resting on the table, the bag sitting beside me. The caption was simple, a well-earned treat. I didn't tag Melanie. I didn't say a word about her or the bag's history, but it didn't matter. Within minutes, my phone buzzed. Melanie, text, why do you have my dream bag? I stared at the message, feeling a strange mix of amusement and anticipation. I didn't respond. A minute later, my phone rang. I sighed and picked up. Hey, Melanie didn't even say hello. Are you serious? She snapped. Why would you buy that? You know how much I wanted it. I kept my voice calm. Because I liked it. Because I wanted it. Because I could afford it. You knew I was saving for that bag. You were talking about saving for it. Meanwhile, you just bought front row tickets to see that band last month. That's different, she shot back. I was going to buy the bag eventually. I exhaled slowly. Melanie, listen to yourself. You don't get dibs on a purse just because you've been daydreaming about it for years. You could have saved for it. You just didn't. She went silent for a moment, but I could hear her breathing hard through the phone. You did this to spite me, she finally said, voice quieter but sharper. That was when I felt it, actual anger creeping up my spine. You really think I spent over $2,000 just to mess with you? I asked. Yes, she snapped. You posted it on purpose. You wanted me to see it. I laughed, more out of frustration than amusement. Melanie, not everything I do is about you. She was silent for a long time. Then, suddenly, she scoffed. Wow, she muttered. You're unbelievable. The call ended. I let out a breath and set my phone down. That went well, Marcus said from the kitchen. Yep, I muttered, rubbing my temples. It wasn't over. Not even close. Half an hour later, my parents called. I considered ignoring it, but I knew if I didn't answer now, I'd just have to deal with it later. I picked up. Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad. My mother's voice was tight but gentle, the classic tone she used when she was about to guilt-trip me into something. Sweetie, she said, Melanie just called us. She's really upset. Yeah, I figured. She says you bought the bag she's been dreaming about for years. I did. Silence. Jessica, my father sighed. You know how much that meant to her. I closed my eyes, already feeling my patience slipping. It's a bag, I said slowly. I didn't steal it from her. It was sitting in a store. I walked in and bought it with my own money. Mom sighed dramatically. It just doesn't look good, honey. I clenched my jaw. Look good to who? To family. To friends. It seems mean-spirited. I let out a sharp laugh. You mean I seem mean-spirited? Jessica, don't be like that, Dad said. Would it really be such a big deal to let her have it? I felt my entire body stiffen. I had expected this, but hearing them actually say it still hit a nerve. Are you seriously telling me to just hand over a $2,000 bag because Melanie suddenly wants it more than I do? Honey, it would be a nice gesture, Mom tried. I took a slow breath. Let me ask you something, I said. Have you ever asked Melanie to put effort into a gift for me? Have you ever told her to reciprocate all the things I've done for her over the years? Another silence. You know she's not great with things like that, Mom finally said. Right, I said bitterly. Because that's just how she is. Dad cleared his throat. Jessica, we're not saying you did anything wrong, but you could still fix this. Fix what? I snapped. The fact that I spent my own money on something I wanted? Neither of them had an answer for that. After a long pause, Mom sighed again. Just think about it, okay? Sure, I said flatly. I'll think about it. I ended the call before they could say anything else. Marcus walked over and handed me a drink. You're gonna need this. I took it and exhaled slowly. This is insane, I muttered. It's just a bag. Marcus smirked. Yeah, tell that to your sister. That night, I checked Instagram out of curiosity. Melanie had already started posting. First, a picture of the bag, taken from the brand's website with a caption. Imagine your own sibling doing something like this. Then, a poll. Should family be respectful of your dreams? I rolled my eyes and locked my phone. I had a feeling this was only the beginning. The next morning, my phone was already buzzing before I even got out of bed. I groaned, grabbed it off the nightstand, and saw my notifications flooded with messages from friends, family, and even a few people I barely talked to. Melanie had officially declared war. She hadn't tagged me directly, but she didn't have to. Her Instagram story was filled with dramatic posts. First, a picture of the bag, taken straight from the brand's website, captioned, "Imagine your own family stealing your dream from you." Then a blurry black and white selfie of her looking sad, with "Some people will never understand how much something means to you until they take it away." And, of course, the inevitable poll. Should family support your dreams instead of crushing them? The results were, unsurprisingly, overwhelmingly in her favor. Marcus leaned over, glanced at my phone, and let out a low whistle. Wow, she really went full meltdown mode. I threw my phone onto the bed and ran a hand through my hair. She's acting like I murdered her dream, Marcus. Well, he said, you did commit the ultimate crime of buying a purse that was available to literally anyone with a credit card. I flopped back onto the pillows and stared at the ceiling. This is so ridiculous. Marcus nudged my arm. So, what's the plan? You gonna respond? I thought about it for a second. My first instinct was to post my own side of the story. Lay it all out. The years of effort I had put into her birthdays. The expensive, meaningful gifts. The fact that she had given me nothing but junk in return. The fact that she had years to buy the bag herself and just never did. But I already knew how that would go. Melanie would twist my words. She'd make herself look like the victim. People would take her side anyway, because she was the loudest. So instead, I shrugged. Nah, I'll let her have her little pity party. Marcus smirked. You're playing the long game. I like it. But the problem with ignoring Melanie? She doesn't just let things go. By noon, I had texts from 3 mutual friends asking what was going on. Friend number 1. Hey, did you really buy the bag Melanie's been saving for? Friend number 2. She's pretty upset. You guys okay? Friend number 3. I don't want to pick sides, but maybe you should just give it to her and avoid the drama? That last one nearly made me chuck my phone across the room. I took a deep breath and typed back a simple response to all of them. I bought a bag. That's it. Because that was all that had happened. But that wasn't enough for Melanie. By the evening, she had moved on to the next stage of her campaign. A new post appeared in her Instagram story. This time, it wasn't just vague whining. It was a screenshot of our text messages. Of course, it was cropped perfectly to make her look like the wounded, heartbroken sister and me like the cold, emotionless villain. All it showed was her saying, "You knew how much I wanted that bag," and me responding, "You had years to buy it and didn't." No context. No explanation. Just enough to send people straight into my DMs. Friend number 4. Wow, that was kinda harsh. Friend number 5. Damn, Jess. That bag really worth losing your sister over? I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I refused to play her game. Instead, I blocked her on Instagram. Let her scream into the void. I was done seeing it. Unfortunately, that didn't stop her from texting me directly. That night, my phone buzzed again. A message from Melanie, longer than any she had sent before. It was a novel. She wrote about how the bag meant more to her than I could ever understand. How it wasn't just an accessory, but a symbol of everything she had wanted but could never have. How seeing me with it was like watching her own dreams be ripped away from her. And, my personal favorite part, how she would never forgive me for this betrayal. I didn't respond. I just stared at the words, wondering how a grown woman could possibly think like this. The next morning, My parents called. Again. I let it ring twice before answering. Let me guess. Melanie called you crying again? Mom sighed. Jessica, she's really struggling with this. You have to understand. No. I cut in. I don't have to understand. Because this whole thing is insane. It's a bag. A bag she never owned. A bag she could have bought if she had just saved up for it like an actual adult. Dad cleared his throat. Honey, we're just trying to find a way to fix this. Then tell Melanie to grow up. I snapped. Mom made a soft tooting sound. Jessica, we know you're upset, but what? I interrupted. You want me to just hand it over? Give it to her to keep the peace? Silence. Then, Mom spoke carefully. Would that really be so bad? I laughed. Actually laughed. Wow. Unbelievable. Dad sighed. Sweetheart, sometimes it's just easier to. Easier for who? I shot back. For you? Because you don't want to deal with Melanie's tantrum? Because you've never held her accountable for anything, and now she's throwing a fit over a bag? Neither of them said anything. Yeah, I muttered. That's what I thought. Then, just to drive the point home, I said, I'm keeping the bag. And if you two are really willing to pick sides over this, then maybe it's time I take a step back from this family. Mom gasped. Jessica, don't be dramatic. Dramatic? I repeated. Mom, your other daughter is out here acting like a luxury handbag is life or death. And I'm the dramatic one? More silence. Then Dad said, just think about it. And I did. I thought about it as I ended the call. I thought about it as I tossed my phone onto the couch and let out a long, exhausted sigh. I thought about it as I grabbed my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and looked at it not as a piece of leather, but as a symbol of something bigger. I had worked for this. I had earned this. I wasn't going to let guilt, or Melanie's tantrum, take that away from me. The next few days were quieter than I expected. No calls from my parents. No new text from Melanie. No passive-aggressive comments popping up in my notifications. For a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she had finally let it go. I should have known better. It wasn't over. She was just changing tactics. It started when one of my coworkers, Rachel, sent me a message out of nowhere. Rachel, hey, random question, have you seen this? Attached was a GoFundMe link. I frowned, clicked it, and immediately felt my stomach drop. Title, Help Me Finally Achieve My Dream. The description was a masterpiece of manipulation. For years, I have dreamed of owning this beautiful handbag. It represents more than just fashion. It represents confidence, success, and a lifelong goal. Unfortunately, due to recent circumstances, I lost my opportunity to get it. I never asked for help, but this means the world to me. If you've ever had a dream taken from you, you understand. Any amount helps. Goal, $2,200. Amount raised so far? $380. I stared at my phone, speechless. She was actually crowdfunding for a purse. Jess? Marcus's voice snapped me out of my trance. I turned the phone toward him. Look at this. He read it, blinked, then let out a sharp laugh. No way. No freaking way. She turned this into a charity case, I said, still processing the sheer audacity of it. Marcus scrolled down, shaking his head. Damn, people are actually donating. Yeah, because she made it sound like someone ripped it out of her hands and set it on fire. I took a deep breath and tried to decide how to handle this. Report it? Call her out? Post my own version of events and expose her ridiculousness? But then I noticed something. Most of the donations came from family members. Aunt Linda had pitched in $50. My cousin Heather added $20 with a comment that read, "You deserve this, Mel." Then, the final insult. A comment from Uncle Steve. I hope this helps. No one should have their dreams stolen from them. We love you. I almost dropped my phone. Marcus, I said slowly, my own family is funding her pity party. Looks that way, he said, still scrolling. But I don't think it's getting as much traction as she hoped. This has been up for a couple of days, and she's barely hit $400. That was the only satisfying part. Melanie had publicly thrown herself onto the floor, kicking and screaming, and the world had responded with an uninterested shrug. For the first time since this all started, I felt something close to victory. I forwarded the link to our mutual friend, Clara, who had been stuck in the middle of this mess. Clara's response came almost instantly. "Clara, you've got to be kidding me. A GoFundMe? For a bag?" Me. "Yep." "Clara, she's lost it." Me. "Fully." "Clara, don't do anything. Let her embarrass herself." I considered that for a moment, and then I decided Clara was absolutely right. Let her beg strangers for money. Let her act like this bag was her life's mission instead of just another expensive thing she wanted but wasn't willing to work for. I wasn't going to lift a finger to stop her. For the next week, I ignored everything. No matter how many mutual friends messaged me asking for my side, no matter how many dramatic posts Melanie made, I refused to respond. Then, one morning, I checked the GoFundMe again out of curiosity. She had stalled at $600. The donations had slowed to a complete halt. And then, a day later, the page was gone. No explanation. No announcement. She just deleted it. I smiled to myself. Marcus leaned over my shoulder. She finally gave up? Looks like it. Huh. So, what's her next move? I shrugged. She'll either pretend this never happened, or double down. The answer came 2 days later. I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw it. A new post from Melanie. She was standing in front of a mirror, posing with the bag. Except, not the bag. A knockoff. The caption read, "Finally." No mention of the GoFundMe. No reference to the weeks of hysteria she had unleashed on the world. Just a casual, "Look what I got" attitude. I showed Marcus, and he immediately started laughing. Wow, she really thought no one would notice? Apparently, I said. The difference was obvious. The material looked cheaper. The stitching wasn't right. The logo was just slightly off. She had gone through all of that and ended up buying a fake. I didn't comment. I didn't like the post. I didn't acknowledge it at all. Because at the end of the day, this wasn't about the bag anymore. It was about boundaries. For years, I had let her get away with giving me nothing while expecting everything. For years, I had let my parents excuse it, let my family enable it, let everyone act like it was just the way things were. Not anymore. I had drawn a line. And no matter how much she cried, no matter how much she begged for sympathy, no matter how much she tried to manipulate the situation, I was not crossing it. Weeks passed. The drama over the bag started to fade, at least on the surface. Melanie wasn't speaking to me. My parents still acted like I was the villain in this whole thing, but they had stopped calling me every other day to guilt-trip me. The rest of the family had mostly moved on, though a few were still clearly holding a grudge. At first, I expected Melanie to make one last dramatic play, a final explosion of emotions, maybe even an apology laced with guilt-tripping, but nothing. Instead, she went silent. No more posts about betrayal. No more vague captions about family disappointment. No more passive-aggressive jabs. She just stopped. And honestly, it was peaceful. For the first time in weeks, I could scroll through my phone without seeing her face, without hearing about the latest ridiculous thing she had said, without dealing with messages from people who had no idea what really happened. And then, one day, I saw it. A new Instagram post. Melanie, holding the real version of the bag. Not the knockoff she had posed with before. The real thing. No explanation. No reference to the months of chaos it had caused. Just a single-word caption. Finally, I stared at it for a long time, waiting to feel something. Anger? Annoyance? Bitterness? But there was nothing. Marcus glanced at my phone. Huh. Guess she finally saved up. Guess so. You gonna say anything? I shook my head. What's the point? She had burned bridges, thrown a tantrum, played the victim, started a GoFundMe, and dragged half the family into this mess. All to end up where she could have been in the first place if she had just saved up like a normal person. It was honestly kind of funny. She had spent months making this bag a symbol of everything she had ever wanted and felt she had been denied. But now, she had it, and I had kept mine. She couldn't take that from me. And most importantly, she couldn't take away the fact that I had finally stood up for myself. The silence between us stretched on for weeks. At family gatherings, we kept it surface level, short greetings, polite nods, no real conversation. My parents, still clinging to the delusion that we could fix things, tried to nudge us towards some kind of reconciliation. One night, my mom called. "Jessica, honey, I've been thinking," I sighed, already knowing where this was going. I think maybe it's time you and Melanie talk things through. You're sisters. Family is important." "We're already talking," I said. "We're perfectly civil." "You know that's not what I mean." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Mom, what do you want me to do? Apologize?" "Because I'm not going to." She hesitated. "I'm just saying maybe—" "No," I said firmly. "I'm not doing this again. I didn't do anything wrong. And if she wants to pretend none of this ever happened, fine. I'll let her. But I'm not going to apologize just to make you feel better." Mom sighed. "I just don't want you two to be distant forever." "Then maybe," I said. She should have thought about that before she dragged the entire family into a meltdown over a purse. She didn't have an answer for that. I ended the call before she could push it any further. And that was it. That was when I fully let it go. I stopped checking for updates on Melanie, stopped waiting for her next move, stopped caring about what she was telling people behind my back. For the first time in years, I had truly set a boundary, and I was keeping it. The strangest part? After everything that had happened, the entire family dynamic shifted. It wasn't obvious at first, but over time, I started noticing the small things. For the first time, certain family members, ones who had always enabled Melanie, were quietly backing away from her. Aunt Linda, who had donated to the GoFundMe, suddenly stopped commenting on all of Melanie's posts. Cousin Heather, who had told me to just give her the bag, reached out to me at a birthday party and casually admitted, "Yeah, looking back, that whole thing was kind of ridiculous." Even my dad, who had initially sided with her completely, started changing the subject whenever Melanie brought up anything remotely related to it. And the biggest change? My birthdays. For the first time in my life, I started receiving gifts from family members that were actually thoughtful. Nothing over the top, but little things that showed effort. A set of high-end pins from my uncle, because he remembered I loved journaling. A beautiful scarf from my cousin, in my favorite color. A small but heartfelt handwritten card from my aunt, telling me how much she appreciated me. It wasn't lost on me that this had never happened before. It was almost like they had finally realized how one-sided things had been for years. And Melanie? She stayed distant. Not in a hostile way, but in a carefully neutral way. She wasn't making a point to avoid me, but she also wasn't making a point to reconnect. At family gatherings, we kept things strictly casual, talked about neutral topics, work, the weather, TV shows, nothing real. But honestly, I was okay with that. I had no interest in rebuilding something that had only ever worked at my expense. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I just didn't care anymore. And that felt amazing. The last time I really thought about the whole ordeal in any detail was months later, during a work trip. I was at the airport, waiting for my flight, the same bag sitting next to me. A woman passed by, paused, and smiled. "That's a gorgeous bag. Where'd you get it?" I smiled back. "Oh, it's a long story." And then, just like that, I moved on.